no fan of Rush Limbaugh. But again, I live in a society that's supposed to respect free speech. Okay, so that's his free speech, right? All of a sudden, there's articles, Gloria Steinem, fire Limbaugh. You know, now I heard you once talk about her, and I did the research, and there's all that stuff about her in the CIA and dating Kissinger, and you're like...
Not trying to empower women, but get them as taxpayers and take their kids. It's cold-blooded.
I don't have that. I mean, I don't do the research like you do, so I don't know that. But I'm saying is, it's funny to me how these people pop up in the narrative all of a sudden when there's an agenda. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're right.
And you're wise enough, and I've learned over time to see beyond the narrative that's presented.
The surface.
Because the surface is usually not the story that they want told. And that's where the Bill O'Reillys and the Rush Limbaughs don't realize they're just cogs in a much bigger system. And of course, they amassed tremendous wealth and power.
Yeah, they promote Limbaugh because he fits in, but now they're wanting to get rid of him. Breitbart dies. They're trying to arrest Rupert Murdoch right now. They're going, and I predicted because I could see the move. And I said, watch, purges are going to start. And there is a purge against kind of the old right. They want just one big, weird, fake left thing that's launching wars, erasing liberty, but calling itself the left, which lends legitimacy to the old left, that this new corporate board wants to cover itself with a mantle of the left, you see?
Yeah, well, I can say this much. I have noticed, you know, being a musician and growing up with a musical father, you know, you tend to be around a lot of liberal people, you know, and drugs seems to be a part of that culture. But anyway, it's a liberal culture, right? And tend to lean more left. Growing up in the 70s, that was a more left-leaning thing. It's very weird to me that the left has become the old right in terms of they don't want to hear ideas, they don't want any dissent, they don't want any questioning. And so when people say, well, what is your political leaning? I certainly can't identify with that left anymore, because I see that now as the party of be quiet and get in line.
Well, that's it. You've got the mainline right wing that's just trying to suppress libertarians and people that want some semblance of freedom, and then haters. It's, you know, a mix of people. And then you've got the left that is just totally sold out to trendiness and feeling like we're good and liberal, not actually standing up for what's right.
Yeah, and here's where you would probably laugh, where I've been attacked the most for expressing any particular opinion, you know, outside of my world, is if I question in any way the global warming, climate change narrative. That is the most virulent attacks that I've seen from people if I question that. It is like, I mean, you think I was skinning babies alive. You know, how dare you attack the earth? And all I'm saying is these are very serious issues worthy of open debate. You know, if you do research, I do my own research. You're not my only informational source. I'll go on and I'll seek climate figures, and this one scientist says this and this other. So you think, well, okay, it's not a settled issue, right? But in this guy's mind, it's a settled issue, and I'm against the planet Earth because I dared question carbon taxes or something, you know. But the reason I'm bringing this up is not to make a point about myself. The reason it's amazing to me that where you have a lot of corporate money sitting behind something, how can a liberal class be that comfortable with that relationship? With the amount of money that's behind the green movements, how can that liberal class be that comfortable? Shouldn't it be going, well, why is this, you know, why is Monsanto standing behind me on this? That's where it gets a little fishy.
But look at the genius, Billy. They're cutting down the rainforest. They're in genetic engineering everywhere. They're splicing all the species. They're building nuclear reactors. They're leaking everywhere. So, of course, the mega corporations who could care less are going to fund the left and take control of the green movement. So it's not about all those real issues. It's about carbon dioxide that plants live off of, that you exhale. That way they can tax it and then steal it as corporate welfare. What I found is the big mega corporations, they lobby for high taxes on the general public and on Main Street because A, they're exempt from it, and B, they're getting it in bailouts and contracts. That's the genius. And that's the scale on the dragon's belly where you can shoot the arrow, is that when you actually explain to someone who's well-meaning and cares about the environment, okay, 160 plus countries are exempt from carbon taxes, but Europe and the US and Australia and New Zealand aren't. And they're going to build 3 power plants a week in China, but shut them down here. They're going to have more carbon going out there. How does more carbon? And they don't know what to say. You're like, oh, So it's about a power grab. And then once you show people the backside of those tricks, then it's all laid bare right there. But again, that's why the media that you've been on the inside of and seen wants to dumb it down. Because as long as they can say, Coney 2012, there's a bad guy in Africa, invade, doesn't matter if the actual invasion bill in Congress says every country in Africa. Mm-hmm. It just feels good, Billy.
Yeah, that's why I think, you're savvy in these matters. I'm certainly not. But I know enough about these systems to know to look beyond the narrative that's being addressed. And because I know how these things work, somebody's going to watch this and say, he's just a singer, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do know this much. If you don't have a rigorous debate around any issue, that's a red flag. Because what's to be so afraid of? That's my point. And where you see the lack of dissent in America and the suppression of an alternate voice, people calling for, regulation of the web, the internet kill switch. These are all really troubling signs because we're moving towards a sort of an agreed upon idea that no one's really agreed upon, because the agreement can only come if there's rigorous debate, and there isn't rigorous.
They create false consensus.
Well, they create a false debate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a dumb artist versus a wacko guy who lives down here and thinks he knows what's going on, right? And that's the way they would marginalize us, not a passionate person who's done a lot of investigation and self-made person who's, has some level of intelligence to look at the world from a particular angle, one of which is I've been allowed access into different corridors of power because of my success.
I think the fact that you've been successful is the evidence of the fact we should listen to you. Look, I have seen this, and I'll actually take one issue with what you said. Well, I'm just a singer, and sure, what do I know? Most of the experts, this appeal to authority that you see on the news, they don't tell you. You can look up each and every pundit. They have got a whole combine, a whole special interest behind them with a talking point. And they're there. I mean, I can find 100 academics for every academic they push.
If I ever watch one of those shows, right, the minute it says foundation for, that's it. I don't listen to that person. If they're a self-made person, you know what I mean? Then they're worthy.
No, that's who you. So you do have credibility.
All right. Well, I
mean, you've run businesses, you've produced music, you've had staying power for 20 years.
I think I have credibility as an American. That would be my point.
Exactly. But I'm just saying, we always have this self-deprecation of, well, I'm just a radio talk show host. Mm-hmm. Like, well, I can go look up that the entire crew of the Coney 2012 movement is government funded and controlled, and that they want to, and that the White House says it's going to be their plan to invade Africa. So right there, I don't have to be a PhD in something. If I catch somebody in bed with my wife, I know they're on top of her in bed. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
No, I completely understand, and that's what I'm trying to say is, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to come here, is because like let's say there's fans that have never come into contact with you, and they do some exploration and they're going to come in contact with ideas that they're not familiar with. My point is not to get locked into the idea of whether you're right or I'm right or you're wrong and I'm wrong. It's to be okay with letting those ideas onto the table and not be afraid of exploring them. Now, if you as an individual listen to your ideas and you say, I just don't get it, I don't resonate with that, then you should follow your own heart. You're what I mean? We're humble enough to admit that we're just men, right? Imperfect and flawed in our own way. All I'm trying to say is we shouldn't be afraid of the debate. The debate is necessary because if everything's so great, why do most of my family feel the pressure of the economy? They keep talking about how the job numbers go up. Well, not in my family.
Totally fake numbers, but I think you've hit a deep truth here, Billy, and that it's simply getting outside the box. It's accepting other ideas, not being threatened by them, and really having a real discussion. And why in this modern system is that so taboo? That is un-American, it's anti-human, it's anti-Renaissance, it's anti-common sense, and that is something no one can disagree with. Anybody that calls for shutting down ideas, anybody that calls for narrow parameters, they're the enemy of humanity.
Exactly. So let's use the Coney thing as an example. I've read things and saw things that you talked about with the Coney stuff. I want to do my own investigation on it, right? You've told me what you thought about it. I know to not just take the let's call it the mainstream narrative of that story. Now I also know that many of my fans are invested in the story. How do I know? They Twittered me about it. They asked me to get involved, be part of the chain of people that were spreading the information on the documentary. I haven't watched the documentary myself. If it's a propaganda piece, I want to see it with my own eyes. If it's something that actually touches me. Where the stupidity will come in is somebody say, well, don't you care about children in Africa, or don't you care about what? Of course I do. I'm a human being. But these are very complex ideas oftentimes, and if we break them down into their micro, we miss the macro. And in the macro, there's obviously something going on globally that is a far greater danger to humanity than any particular issue. So we have to be human enough to both address the micro issue, but we can't take our ball off the macro. For example, one thing I just shake my head on, and I'm probably wrong in the statistics, but like what's going on with Greece with the debt deals, as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll hear about it. But they had to sell their lottery. They had to sell. They're giving away islands now, and then you find out from reading different economists that 90% of that debt is paper debt, right? It's
well, Goldman Sachs got their president and finance minister to back up the bankers' debt. So they're selling everything to prop up the too big to fail. Yeah.
But then you can understand why somebody in Greece is sitting there saying, okay, we supposedly owe all this money, but yet, it's not like we got all these roads built or these schools and we went crazy. There's nothing to really show for it.
Total fraud.
So that's where you have to look and say something's going on systemically in the global system that's very troubling. You see these things come up, and if you pay enough attention and certainly read outside the American media, if you read European media, there's a great concern for what's going on.
Oh, they admit it's the bankers engineered this, it's a coup, but they're holding us hostage. What do we do? The Europeans actually are informed and want to know the truth. And back to the Coney thing, day one, George W. Bush is endorsing it. Well, this is a known war criminal. So right there, okay, George Soros is involved. Okay, the State Department's involved. Okay, this guy hadn't been seen in 5.5 years. Okay, they want this oil. Okay, and then you find out the whole story. It's just there's a bad man, we're invading Africa, and the average American doesn't even know where Africa is. So it's just like, our troops are over there fighting that bad man. And that's where the lack of debate and just this one-dimensional of we're the good guys.
And that's why I'm saying I appreciate the alternative viewpoint that you bring into this, because that's what needs to happen. It needs to be measured against the other ideas that are come. Because most of the, if I was to say, if I was going on my Twitter and say, okay, why do you care about the Coney thing? The number one thing is kids, women being abused, raped, mutilation. So it's where those negative systems, if we can quantify them as that, take real human desire to want to help something, the oppressed and and then it gets mixed into an agenda. And so if you try to put yourself in the middle of that agenda, you'll be attacked as somebody as being unsympathetic enough.
Exactly. They use the one-dimensional nature instead of saying, okay, these global corporations have been caught killing 100 times that, and they certainly don't care about these populations. They've used these emotional appeals, waving the bloody shirt over and over again. Are we going to take the bait again? But I get it. They're going to then attack you and say, you're not a nice man. You want to hurt the children.
I don't want to hurt the children. That's what I'm saying is, and that's why I would say to anybody who's one of my fans, is where you turn the corner on this is not to be afraid of the ideas. You take the ideas onto your own table, you discuss them with your family, your wife, and then you make your own decision.
Exactly. Don't let somebody else make the decision.
That's it. I'm not here to advocate your position or my position. I'm here to advocate the concept of liberty, right? And we're two people are expressing it in different ways. I express it through music. You express it through a vigorous political, social debate.
The ancients, get back to the Greeks, as you know, called it the wisdom of the street or the common man. Kind of that general consensus throughout cultures has been decided that's the best place. And before we did this interview tonight, you were